Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to our garden, but not our vegetable garden for a change. That's through this arch. But today I want to focus on the ornamental part of our landscape. I did this back in the spring, and at that time I promised I would do this seasonally so you can see the evolution of our garden throughout the year. We've got all kinds of things that we grow, and they all give me such joy. Now, quickly, I want to mention that I live in Spokane, Washington with my husband, Bill, and our hardiness zone here ranges from 5B to 6A. There's a couple of things I wanted to mention as we get underway. First of all, we live on 5 acres, and when we bought the property, it was a bare piece of land with one native pine on it. That was it. So Bill and I have done the landscape ourselves over the years, and there are some things maybe we wish we had done differently, but for the most part, it really is a joyful landscape, and I hope you'll feel the same as I take you through it. The other thing I want to mention is we are in a drought right now. It is so dry here. So as I'm going along, if you see something that looks a little wilty or the soil looks super dry, that's why. You know, we're on a well, and in theory we could just use water with great abandon, and we try to be really responsible and not overuse the water. We do try to put mulches on a lot of things, and we just try to be smart about our water use. So there will be some things that don't look all that great, and that's why. So now let's get started. What I wanted to say is that when our house was built, they put in a lawn behind it where I'm standing, and when they were building the house, they excavated for a full basement, which is great. However, we think they put all the hard pan soil out here. So every year the lawn would look great for about a month or two, and then it would die. Same thing year after year. I would aerate it. We'd make sure that it got plenty of water. We fertilized it. We did everything we could think of, and every year it looked great for a few months, and then it would die. So we finally said, okay, enough is enough. We tore out the back lawn, and what we did is we created 2 large island beds plus some other perimeter beds. And in the pathways, this has a heavy-duty landscape fabric underneath a layer of bark. And that has worked really well for us because this stuff does not need any water. In this area, we've got a little 50-gallon pond. It's basically a wildlife pond. It's in sort of a little secluded area, and it's surrounded by lady's mantle, daylilies, which are just finishing blooming for the year, and a couple of ornamental grasses. This one is Bowles Golden, and I think it's gorgeous. Now you can see the back pathway. So on the right is the large island bed, which I'll show you in just a moment. And on the left, that is the back bed. And when I say back bed, it doesn't go all the way to the back side of our property. We wanted to have an immediate landscape that is closer in, easier to care for, and so on. So along the left side, the trees are crabapple trees. We've got some different types of spireas, an azalea, and a really cool clematis that I'd like to show you. You're looking at a bush clematis, and this is something I've shown before. It does not grow in a long vine like typical clematis do. And the flowers are gorgeous, and as you can see, there's a gazillion of them on here. So that is something I heartily recommend. They're super easy to grow, and every now and then I need to tie it up a little bit. It's probably about 5 feet tall, and I've got a very small trellis behind it that I use for support. Now, while I'm next to what we call the big island bed, I just wanted to explain that what we're growing in this bed is primarily native shrubs, and that's for birds and wildlife. So we have golden currants, American cranberry bush, snowberries, mock orange, milkweeds, and so on. Up ahead you can see we have a small island bed in the middle of it is where our hawthorn tree is growing. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that it was really beaten up in a nasty windstorm and some snowstorms, and it has really come back. So thank goodness for that. So I'll show you that bed in just a moment, but I want to continue down the back side of our garden so that you can see what I'm growing. So here is a part of our back bed that is not looking very impressive yet, but you might have seen it before because last year I created a new landscape bed here. And so you can see there's a couple of hydrangeas, there's an azalea on the left in the back. I've got a couple of hostas growing in here, some Hakanakloa Japanese forest grass, some coleus, and some heuchera or coral bells that have a really nice lime green foliage, although you can see some of those leaves are looking a little crispy. Moving on with the back bed, I've got some 9-bark in here on the left. There's bee balm, Shasta daisies, petunias, daylilies, and we're almost to the trellis garden. So this is the trellis garden, and I mostly have annuals in here, which is great fun. So I've got some wonderful coleus, some dianthus, snapdragons, cosmos, foxgloves, and Verbena bonariensis, which is a great filler plant. So let me show you a few close-ups so you can see why I'm so excited about it. So look at this beautiful cosmos. This is rubenza, and it's my first year to grow it. I just love the color of the blossoms. Now I have been super busy lately, and that means I'm behind on deadheading. Deadheading refers to removing spent blossoms from a plant. And the reason you want to go to the trouble of doing that is because if you leave them on the plant, they will set seed and the plant will basically shut down. You want the plant to keep blooming for you, so by deadheading the spent blossoms, it will keep blooming for a very long time. And in the case of cosmos, all the way to the end of our growing season. Here's another type of cosmos I'm growing for the first time this year. This one is called apricota. And it's pretty hard to see on the camera, but there's just little tinges of sort of a peachy yellow apricot color. So that's another winner as far as I'm concerned. Here is another annual that I'm growing from seed. It's actually a snapdragon, and it's called Double Shot Yellow Red Heart. That is just plain cool. And you can see it's got all sorts of buds on it, so I think these are absolutely going to be covered with blossoms. It's so much fun to try new things. Now if you look closely, here's another annual that I'm growing. This is one I've grown many times before. It's called salpiglossus or painted tongue. Comes in really cool colors. Look at that. Wow. Now I mentioned Verbena bonariensis. The variety is Vanity, and I have grown it as an annual for many years, and it is absolutely gorgeous. They are about 2.5 feet tall, and what I love about them is you can see right through past the flowers, so they don't block anything. They just enhance the colors of the plants around them. Just past the trellis garden are a couple things that you might be interested in. The purple flowered plant is bee balm or Monarda didyma, and it is very prolific with the flowers, and boy do the pollinators love it. Unfortunately, it spreads quite a bit, so you will see it in various parts of our landscape. And every now and then I rein it back in, and then it pops up somewhere else. The green plant that's just in the foreground there is Euphorbia polychroma or cushion spurge. That is another one where the gift keeps on giving because it pops up in different places. But I just try to keep it where I want it, and it's something that I really enjoy. In the spring, they have the most gorgeous chartreuse bracts. It's a pretty amazing landscape plant. So now you can see a little bit more of the small island bed, and that's where the hawthorn tree is growing. I have it surrounded by all different kinds of perennials and a rose called Blanc Double de Coubert. You can see more bee balm, surprise, surprise. There's catmint in there, and the yellow flowers are a perennial sunflower called Helianthus. I've got sedums in here and all sorts of things. Now, unfortunately, I can't show you the opposite side of the bed where other things are growing because we have a bird that's nesting right in the middle of it, and I don't want to scare her away. But I did see the other day that she has teeny tiny little nestlings in there. Now, in another area of the landscape, you probably could see this structure in the background, and I just wanted to clarify that that is a temporary structure while our blueberries are ripening, because lots of birds come in to eat them, and so we are using a new structure, and it is working great for us. And then, of course, the two vertical planters in the foreground are greenstock vertical planters, and I grow all kinds of flowers, herbs, and veggies in them. So we've almost come full circle in the backyard, and what you're looking at now is the other end of the large island bed. And that bird singing was a song sparrow, and that is the type of bird that has the nest in our garden. If you look at the center, you probably can see a little bird bath there. We also have one, if I can pan gently for you, to the right here. So we like to keep our birds happy. But in addition to all sorts of native shrubs that are in this bed, I'm also growing bee balm, surprise, some hostas, anemones, an oak leaf hydrangea, penstemon, and Shasta daisies. Now we're at one edge of what I like to call the rose garden, although it also has shrubs in it as well as perennials and bulbs. But what you're looking at with all those wonderful pale flowers is a hydrangea called Mini Mauvette. That is an awesome one. I heartily recommend it. And then just to the right of it is a shrub with red flowers called Calycanthus Aphrodite sweet shrub. That is an amazing one that I have grown for quite a few years now. When I first got it, I thought this plant is not going to survive our winters because it just looks too tropical. But survive the winters it does. And the cool thing is that the flowers have kind of a fruity scent to them, so that's unusual. This is what one of the unopened flowers looks like. They're just so cool. Another plant that's growing in this bed is a Rudbeckia called Sahara Mix. I have grown this every year. It comes in all sorts of really cool colors. And look at how many flowers this one plant has. It's super easy to grow, and while most of the Rudbeckias don't make it through our winters, this one does. And when I say this one, I mean this specific plant. Some of its relatives tend not to make it through our winters. So this is the rose garden, which you saw before in the other video, and a lot of this area is very dry from this drought. But I'm growing roses in here, mostly David Austin English roses, and so things like Darcy Bustle, Munstead Wood, Queen of Sweden, Vanessa Bell, and so on. The other thing I wanted to point out, and I'll do a close-up so you can see what I'm talking about, but you might recall that in the other video I had pruned back all of this because there was a lot of dead wood. So there are clematis vines in here and also climbing roses. And look how much it has filled in. That is amazing. So I'm really happy to see that they've recovered okay from some pretty intense pruning. So now you can see what I'm talking about. I mean, they just exploded into bloom. And so I've got a purple clematis, and right behind this rose, you can't really see it, but I've got a beautiful pink clematis, and it's just starting to bloom. Now in my spring video, I showed you this wonderful hydrangea. It's called vanilla strawberry. And the flowers started out with sort of a greenish cast and white. Now they're all sort of an ivory color, and pretty soon they'll start having little hints of pink, and the flowers will turn more of a pale strawberry color. This is an awesome shrub, and I heartily recommend it. Now we're out in our front yard, and the two main parts of it are this long flower bed that I've had for years, and then a few years back we put in a long pollinator garden for the purpose of attracting pollinators and all sorts of beneficial insects. So let's take a look at these two components of our front landscape. It's starting to get pretty breezy, so now I've got moving targets to show you, but I just thought you'd enjoy this combination of a type of Gloriosa daisy and the purple bee balm. Yep, more bee balm, but isn't that pretty? I've got a couple of daylilies that are just getting close to the end of their blooming season, but look at this beautiful red one, and check out this cool one. So this one I do know the name of. That is Ruby Spider. Wow. As you can see, I like all different colors of flowers. So what you're looking at in the front left is a type of annual poppy. This plant is a type of Rudbeckia called Prairie Sun. This is my first year to grow them. I planted them from seed, and I tucked them in here and there, and I think they are the coolest things ever. These are a Coreopsis. I think those are delightful. And the red flowered plants are Gaillardia or blanket flower. How about a more petite zinnia called Aztec Sunset? Isn't that pretty? Now, speaking of bee balm, yes, I have it here and there in this big front bed. It's hard to get mad at it because it attracts so many different kinds of pollinators. You can see all kinds of bumblebees on here at the moment. So it's a nice plant, but every now and then I dig up a bunch of it and try to rein it back a little bit, and that happens for about a year or two, and then they're right back at it. I have all sorts of daylilies in this bed, and I just love them, but I've forgotten the names of most of them. I also have more annual poppies, more bee balm, some phlox, and I want to show you those up close because they're blooming in another area of this bed. So let's take a look at that. So here are the two phlox that I'm growing. The pink one is Laura, and the white one in the background there is David. And they're both doing really well, sometimes a little too well, but I do my best to rein things back in as I can. I also have a little patch of calendulas. Now they are an annual plant, and what they do is they reseed themselves. And so in the spring, I look to see how many have come up, and then I sort of edit them as needed because I don't want them all over the place, but they certainly add a nice splash of color to this bed. So here is a really pretty poppy. And if you're wondering why I've saved all these pods up on top, it's because I'm saving the seeds. And I need to let the seeds and these pods dry out completely. Then I'll pick them, store them through the off season, and then plant them in late winter by just sprinkling them here and there on top of the snow, and they actually will germinate and give us a lot of beauty for the garden. Now I always have to back up a bit so you can see this obelisk or tutur that I put in this garden last year. And I had fully intended to grow cup and saucer vine up it, and they just did not grow well at all. I don't know why, because this year they're trying to make up for it. So all of these vines are cup and saucer. I also have two different kinds of really fragrant sweet peas, and you can see they're heading up. But every now and then they need my guidance to grow up the support and not head through the flower bed. The last thing I wanted to show you in this flower bed is my Shasta daisies. So these are banana cream, and they start out a beautiful shade of pale yellow, and then they turn more ivory as the season goes on. But this is another very easy to grow perennial, and they give me so much joy because they produce so many flowers. Now we're finally to the pollinator garden, and before I move on, have you ever seen a coneflower this big? I think it's getting towards 5 feet in height, which is amazing. It doesn't hurt that there's a sprinkler down here. He knows he's got a good life. So we've planted a lot of commonly known plants in addition to these coneflowers. We've got Shasta daisies, Gloriosa daisies, yes, bee balm, but we also have all sorts of native plants in this bed. Now again, I mentioned that we're going through a drought, and this bed is very hard to water. We're real mindful of how much we use. And so there are some plants that are either near the end of their flowering season or they're suffering from the drought. So things will not look quite as great as I'd like you to see, but I will take you through just so you can get an idea of what's in here. These little red flowers are a type of geum, and back here is a type of goldenrod. Now I have to tell you, goldenrod can be a bit invasive. This is another plant that every now and then I have to do a bit of editing in the bed so it doesn't take over the entire bed. This interesting umbrella-like plant in the background is a Maximilian sunflower, and it will have stalks that are probably 8 feet tall. So it's quite the spectacle when they're in bloom. Here's a pretty little penstemon. And the nice thing about them is that they attract pollinators as well as hummingbirds. Are you wondering what kind of plant these cool leaves belong to? This is showy milkweed. Here's another type of milkweed that we're growing. I'm pretty sure I showed you these hanging baskets in my spring garden video. And I wanted to tell you something very interesting that I've learned. Last year was my first year of growing in these baskets. They've got a cocoa fiber lining, and I planted them up just like you would any hanging basket with, a nice quality potting soil. I put in a little bit of Osmocote fertilizer. They get watered practically every day. And so last year, the plants did quite poorly in them, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've lost my touch. What is wrong? So this year, I forgot all about that. I planted up these hanging baskets with a type of coleus, begonia, and calibrachoa. And they started off pretty well, and then they started struggling. I usually don't have a problem with growing things in hanging baskets. Well, I've learned something very interesting, and I wanted to share it with you in case you're having the same problem. It turns out that it's more difficult for the pots to retain their moisture when they have that cocoa fiber lining. That doesn't mean you need to give them up and switch to something completely different. Actually, there is a product called rain gel. You can get it either as granules that you would mix in at planting time, or you can get them as a little mat that sits inside the cocoa fiber mat at the bottom. And I've seen all sorts of reviews for it, and apparently it works great. So that's what I'm going to do next year. You better believe I'm going to have a note to self about using the rain gel. So I just wanted to let you know about that, and I'll put some more information about it in the description that goes with this video. Another lesson learned. Last but not least, I've got a few other things growing on our front porch. I have a pot of begonias and coleus that has started from seed. Yes, it's easy to grow them from seed. And then I have the 2 picket planters that my dad made me ages ago, and I've planted them up with coleus and calibrachoa. I hope you enjoyed this tour. I hope it wasn't too long, and I really appreciate your joining me today. Happy gardening.